Hello and welcome to this week's edition of BS with AJ. This week we're going to be installing a ceiling fan into a room that had no prior lighting in it. Stick around. Hey guys, like I said before, this week we're going to be installing a ceiling fan into a room that didn't have any lighting in the beginning. This is an older house and it was wired up to where one switch ran several plugs that went around the room so you could use it for lamps and things. But instead we're going to be putting in a ceiling fan, so we're going to have to run new wires. We're going to have to put two three-way switches in for it and everything, so stick around. Alright, here's the material that you're going to be needing for this project. First, you're going to need a junction box up there because we're going to be splicing into an existing wire that's up in the ceiling going to the room that we're working in. We have a box for our light switch. We have two three-way switches. And the reason we have two three-way switches and only one box is because we're using an existing box that's already in the house. It's got a switch on it that's wired to a couple plugs in the living room here, and it was set up for lamps, basically, because it's an older house. So we're going to be rewiring that to where we can use this switch here in the place of the other switch for our ceiling fan. We also have a light switch cover for this box, of course. We have wire nuts, electrical tape, some 14-3 wire. We have 50 foot of that. And 14-3 means that it's 14 gauge and 3 wires with a ground is what that means. And then last, of course, we have our ceiling brace box kit, which is a heavy duty one, so it's going to be really good for holding up a lot of weight, which our ceiling fan weighs a little bit, so it'll be great for it. Alright, as far as the tools you need, there's not really a whole lot that you actually need for this project. You're going to need something to cut the hole with. I'm going to be using a jigsaw. You can use a handsaw or sawzall or whatever the heck you got. I definitely suggest using a headlamp if you don't have a drop light, or both even, because the more lights you have, the easier it's going to be to work. You're going to need a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver. You will need some wire strippers, and I got these heavy duty wire cutters right here for cutting the 14-3 wire. You're also going to be needing a tape measure, and a voltage detector is vital. You definitely need this to avoid getting shocked. Alright, now as you can see, we have our spot marked on the ceiling where we want to put our ceiling fan. The way that I did it, I measured the width and the length of the room, and I divided them both in half, and I just measured off each wall and put it dead center of the room. Now you can put it wherever you'd like. That's just the way I'm doing it right now. There are 3 tools that I forgot to mention that you are going to need for sure. One would be a step ladder. I have a 6-foot ladder. You could probably get away with an 8-foot or a 4-foot. If you're tall enough, you may not need one. The next thing is a drill. You'll definitely need a drill to pilot these holes. And you're also going to need a glow-in-the-dark fish stick set. Basically, these are used so that you can pull wires up through walls and across the ceilings and things like that. And it glows in the dark, so it's easier to find in the dark, of course. So what we're going to do now is we're going to drill a small hole on that X. And we're going to take our glow-in-the-dark fish stick and stick it up through there, and then we're going to tape that to the ceiling. So that way when we go up through the attic, we'll be able to spot it pretty quick and know where our hole is. The reason we're going to do that is because we want to make sure our junction box isn't going to be in the middle of a stud or something. So we're going to get up there, and if we can fit the junction box there, great. And if we need to move it one way or the other, we'll know. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and drill our hole. I definitely suggest using safety glasses because you're going to be drilling overhead and you don't want anything to fall in your eyes. So we're going to go ahead and drill our hole now. Alright, now that we have our hole drilled, we're going to go ahead and take our fish stick that glows in the dark. We're going to stick it up through there pretty good ways because there is insulation up there, of course. And we're going to be taping this to the ceiling to make sure it stays, so that when we go up in the attic here in just a minute, we can still find it and it hadn't fell down yet. Okay. Alright, I went upstairs and checked to see where our hole was, and ended up being dead center in the middle of 2 studs, which works out great for us. So basically, what we're going to do now is we're going to knock out these 3 knockouts right here, because we're going to end up with 3 wires coming into here since we're putting 2 3-way switches on it. We're going to go ahead and knock these out, and then I'm going to trace around it up on the ceiling so that I know where to cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a flathead screwdriver and a hammer and just kind of knock them through, just like this. Then you can come to the inside here and break them off. Wiggle them back and forth a little bit here. May come right out of there. That may need to be knocked down a little more. Alright, so what we're going to do now is go ahead and trace this up on the ceiling and cut our hole out. Alright, you see this center hole right here that we already have? We're going to take this center hole and line it up, just like this. And we're going to trace around this hole. That way we know where to cut in just a minute. Alright, now we have our hole drawn out here. We're going to go ahead and take our jigsaw and cut that out now. Alright, now as you can see, I've drilled 4 more holes here closer to the edge of this. And that's to make this easier to cut, so I can get this jigsaw into these other places here. Maybe I can cut it into 4 quarters or whatever makes it easier. Now you may want to wear a dust mask for this. I'm definitely going to put one on. Alright, now we're going to start drilling, or sawing. Alright, now that we have our hole cut, we're going to go ahead and take this part right here. As you can see, it has threads right here on this side, and it also has spikes. It has spikes on both sides. And this side here just kind of free spins. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and stick this part up on one of the joists, and we're going to spin this. As you can see, it extends out, and we're going to keep spinning it until this gets really tight up in there. We're going to get as tight as we can, because that's what's going to hold your ceiling fan into place. And then afterwards, we're going to take this and slide it to where our hole is and go ahead and put our junction box on that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take this with a threaded end right here. Tighten it up a little bit. We're going to take it and put it into place here. Alright, now that we have our pole into place, what we're going to do is going to snap this onto place here. As you can see, we got 2 screws started on it. And the reason we have those 2 screws started is because right here on the back of this, as you can see, it's got the bigger holes right here, and then it slides into a smaller hole. We're going to slide it over the screws that we just put in, and then we're going to snap it into place on the smaller part down here. And then we'll put our other 2 screws in. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and take this and snap it on. Slide it up over here to the middle. Then we'll take this and slide our screws in the holes here. And we'll start our other 2 screws. Start the other one. go ahead and tighten it down. Alright, now we have our junction box in place. Alright, now we have our hole marked out for where we want to put our other light switch. I've measured up 50 inches to the bottom of this hole. I came from this edge 3 inches over, and then the hole is 2 1/4 by 3 3/4. So just go ahead and draw that out, and we're going to go ahead and cut it out now. Alright, our next step, we're going to go ahead and take this apart right here, because this switch is actually connected to a receptacle. This house is older, so it was set up to use for lamps. They'd plug lamps in around the room, and they'd have certain receptacles hooked to this switch, so when you turned it on, all the lamps would come on, as opposed to having overhead lighting like we do nowadays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this switch out, and I'm going to tie that together and make it hot all the time. And then we're going to take this switch out and put our 3-way switch in its place and run a new wire down the wall to our ceiling fan. But the first thing you're going to want to do is take your voltage tester, turn it on. As you can see, it's green right now. And you want to, right now, as you can see, it's reading voltage. So there's still power to this switch. We're going to go down to our breaker box and cut it off, and then we'll test it again and make sure there's no power there before we start messing with it. Alright, we went down to our breaker box and we turned it off. Now we're going to test it and make sure there's no voltage still. Alright, so we made sure that we got the right breaker. We turned the right breaker off. So now we're going to go ahead and start taking this apart. Alright, now that we made sure there's no voltage coming to it, we're going to go ahead and take our cover off, which is pretty simple. For this one here, it's got 4 flathead screws. I already had 2 of them taken out. Alright. Now our cover is taken off. And we want to double check here before we start messing with things. So we're going to turn our voltage tester on. And we're going to go through here and make sure there's no voltage showing up in this box at all. Alright, it's not reading any voltage at all. So we're safe to work on it. And we're going to be taking this switch here out, because that's the one that's going to the receptacle. Alright, on this switch you can see there's only 2 wires going to it. And basically the white wires are already all connected, and this is what's going to keep the power from going to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 screws loose and take these wires off. You may have to pry them apart with a screwdriver a little bit to get them off. Or you could just simply take this screw out the rest of the way. And then it slides right off. Alright, now that we have those off, what we're going to do, since these are already got this little hook right here for where it was going around that screw, we want to straighten that out. So we're going to take our wire cutters here and use the pliers on the end of them here. Go ahead and straighten them out. Alright, now what we're going to do here is we're going to tie these 2 wires together, because we want that plug to stay hot all the time instead of having the switch connected to it. Instead, we're going to put another switch here that have another wire that goes over to our ceiling fan. So what we're going to do is go ahead and butt these up together and put us a wire nut on it. Make sure it's on there good. And then just for safety reasons, we're going to go ahead and take this electrical tape and go over it to make sure there's no exposed wires that are going to be hitting the metal box that's back here. Alright, now this box is big enough we can just shove it back here out of the way. Hey guys, this project ended up running a little long, so we're going to have to cut it up into a few different videos. Be sure to come back next week as we start running the wires to all the switches and for the light fixture itself. Also, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave that down in the comments section below. I'd really appreciate that. And consider supporting BS with AJ on Patreon because it helps us to do bigger and better projects. We'll see you next week.